Malo Vakalevu for welcoming us and giving us this opportunity to present today. Nisambulu Vanaka, we're here today to present our findings from our recent report, Compass Whānau Pasifika, Navigating Schooling in Aotearoa New Zealand. Before we get started, we wanted to take a moment to introduce ourselves. Malo Ambola, nei adango Renee Tuifanglele, o ngoni a lewa ni moa lewu mai wanumbala walau, a vasu ki wakano mai la kimbalau. Kia ora koutou, my name is Renee Tuifanglele and I'm a researcher at NZCER.
Kia ora nara wa tātou katoa toa I te aoro a rānui nui o te atua, ko tōku ingoa, ko Rahira Minders, no te motu o Ātu au. Kia ora nā everyone, my name is Rahira. My strongest whakapapa link is to the island of Ātu in the Cook Islands, but I'm also Dutch and Irish. Kei te puna wānanga, kei waipapa tai matarau e mahi ana. I work at the University of Auckland in the School of Māori and Indigenous Education. I'll pass on to our colleague Jean.
Amalola lei, heku hungoa ko Jean M. Waske Allen, ko Ike te mai ko Bala Waske me Tonga, ko Iku Whae ko Jocelyn Dent me Taranaki, pia o kuo Malikia ko Christopher Allen me o Kalani. Malola lei everyone, my name is Jean. I am a lecturer at the University of Auckland in health education, and I'm really excited to be here with you all and thank you for your time. I know that it's a really busy time of year for you all, so just thank you for bearing with us and we'll try and be as thorough and quick as we can. I also just wanted to take the time to acknowledge Professor Melinda Weber, who can't be with us today, but just to acknowledge her and the awesome work that she's done in bringing us together to work on this project.
A special mention to Muhammad Elanzari, Sheridan McKinley, Helene Visser, and Pepe Ramondi for supporting us with the report. We appreciate the time and effort they have each contributed to this as well. First up, we'll provide you with some background about Compass and provide an introduction to wayfinding. Then we'll outline the methodology that we use for this project. We'll spend most of the session sharing our findings with you. These will be the values and characteristics that guide Aotearoa Pasifika to success. The data used for Compass was taken from a national research project led by Professor Melinda Weber, entitled Kia tū rangatira ai, Living, Thriving, and Succeeding in Education. The strengths-based research project investigated how Aotearoa learn, succeed, and thrive at school. This nationally representative project had large numbers of Aotearoa, Whānau, and Kaiako survey responses from 102 schools across Aotearoa. The project was funded by a Rutherford Discovery Fellowship administered by the Royal Society Te Aparangi. Rahira will now introduce us to the practice of wayfinding, which is what we used in the report.
Kia ora ana. We've employed the Indigenous practice of wayfinding to frame discussions about how Whānau Pasifika envisage success for their tamariki through a range of values and characteristics. Thus, in the context of this report, Whānau are wayfinding by centering Pasifika values as a way of navigating the educational journey with their tamariki in Aotearoa. We can understand the values identified in the report as a star path by which the navigators find their way. The characteristics are the enactment of values that steer Aotearoa towards achieving their educational aspirations. We also thought long and hard about how we were going to acknowledge our reo moana, our Pacific languages throughout the report, whilst also recognising te reo Māori. Ultimately, we sought to centre our own heritage languages, Lea Whakatonga, Osa Wakawiti, and te reo Māori Kukiairene, in the sections that we wrote. However, in the remainder of the report, we prioritised te reo Māori. This act is a demonstration of our commitment to our own reo moana, but also our acknowledgement as tangata tiriti of te reo rangatira o tēnei whenua, the chiefly language of this whenua, te reo Māori. Toi tū te reo. I will now pass back to Renee.
Yep. The next section we will look at is our approach and the research participants. This study used a qualitative exploratory research design focusing on what whānau of Whānau Pasifika had to share about their experiences supporting their tamariki to be successful at school. It is not just the learner who undertakes this learning journey, but the whānau and communities that support them as well. Ultimately, the study aims to provide in-depth whānau perspectives about what is already working well and what else can be done to support the success of ākonga in and beyond the classroom. The participants for the study were whānau that identified their tamaiti as belonging to one or more Pacific Island ethnic group. The primary intermediate students group was chosen due to the large number of responses in the dataset. Overall, we analysed the responses of 362 whānau members. I'll now pass it on to Jean.
Thanks, Renee. So as articulated in the report, it was really important to us to not only promote the perspectives of Whānau Pasifika, but also to provide those who are not Pacific or Indigenous insight into how our values are lived by whānau. That was why we decided to not only present the findings in accordance with our values, but also to provide examples of how these values were being enacted by whānau. We saw the enactment of values by whānau as part of wayfinding, the coming together of values and their practical embodiment as a means of guidance for future generations. So we'll present the findings through this lens of values enacted by Whānau Pasifika. We now turn to our first value of belonging, which Renee is going to unpack and discuss for us.
Thanks, Jean. The first value we'll touch on is belonging. In the study, belonging included feeling a connection to whānau and culture and feeling secure in their multiple identities. Despite the distances that separate Pasifika peoples from their homeland and the Western society they have to contend with here in Aotearoa, the sense of belonging still remains a powerful cultural pillar that cannot be disrupted. Culture not only provides connection, but also a code of conduct to guide behavior. One participant identified that when children know their roots, they know who they are and the values they should uphold and hold on to. In contrast, whānau recognized the consequences of not belonging. A child's identity is everything. If a child does not belong, then they don't feel grounded or supported. Belonging to multiple ethnic groups is a reality for many people here in Aotearoa. According to the Ministry for Pacific Peoples, the number of multicultural Pacific individuals is on the rise. Whānau considered having mixed identity as positive, as it's an opportunity to belong in multiple contexts and places. This provides a counter-narrative to historical and contemporary depictions of mixedness as being detrimental to one's identity. I'll now pass it on to Rahira to speak on the characteristic that we paired with belonging.
Thanks, Renee. A key characteristic that whānau thought contributed to success at school was their involvement in school life. To Whānau Pasifika, involvement in school life included being physically present at school, being involved in the school's organisational structures, and attending parent-teacher interviews. One participant gave some explicit instructions as to how whānau can achieve visibility at school. Parents be present, attend school functions, volunteer, and randomly show up for lunch at least once a week. Another facet of school-based involvement is being engaged in organisational structures, such as being part of the Board of Trustees. As one whānau member advised, get involved at all levels, including governance, and influence policy and practice that is culturally responsive for all children. Involvement in school is not always possible for Whānau Pasifika, but there's a clear sense that whānau in this study saw being involved as central to the success of their tamariki. Parent-teacher interviews were seen as another key method of communication with the school. One whānau member mentioned be there for them, like going to parent conferences. Being physically present at school events and being in contact with the school were considered the best forms of involvement. By being involved in the education of their tamariki, whānau created an essential link between culture and school experiences of their tamaiti. By whānau being involved, it is more likely that primary school tamariki Pasifika will see some representation of themselves at school and feel a sense of belonging. I'll now pass back to my colleague Renee.
Thank you. The second value is the importance of whānau, and this was seen as 3 key understandings. 1, whānau and cultural transmission. 2, the stability or foundation that whānau provide. And 3, the teaching and learning of values within the whānau. The structure of Whānau Pasifika is often complex and goes beyond the nuclear family. Many different whānau members contribute to the growth and development of tamariki. This was usually done through intergenerational transmission of knowledge. Whānau spoke of their appreciation towards the older generations and their involvement with the upbringing and learning of tamariki. They also valued their contribution to their identities and success. The complexity of whānau also reflected the diversity of Aotearoa Pasifika in classrooms here in Aotearoa. These diverse contexts brought about opportunities for tamariki to learn about their different ancestral histories. For many tamariki, whānau provide them with a strong foundation and source of stability. Many participants include and acknowledge past and present whānau. For one whānau member, it was important to reflect on one's whakapapa as a grounding for the child's identity. Whānau also valued the collective nature and constant presence they provide for tamariki. They all share responsibilities and work towards shared aspirations for their tamariki. For several tamariki Pasifika born in Aotearoa, whānau is a site of learning and practicing values. Teachers have the opportunity to draw on the 2 elements of whānau and values to better engage Aotearoa Pasifika at school. The characteristic we paired with whānau was encouraging tamariki to succeed. The types of encouragement whānau gave to tamariki varied, but generally focused on areas such as the future success of ākonga, like helping them to pursue their own passions and interests, growing perseverance, and using strengths-based parenting approaches. Whānau believed that encouraging the tamariki to learn good practices at school helped them achieve success later in life as well. They described this idea of success as having a good life too. So the encouragement of life skills, attributes, and practices to achieve success for tamariki will go beyond their time at school. Encouraging tamariki to realize their own aspirations was seen as another stepping stone towards achieving success at school. Whānau wanted their tamariki to dream big, develop a good work ethic, and have familial support to pursue their dreams and aspirations. Whānau wanted their tamariki to learn how to be resilient and to keep moving forward when learning at school. Whānau aimed to be that foundation and stability for tamariki so they could develop their own academic perseverance and to work diligently. The participants also wanted the tamariki to achieve the best outcomes and become the best versions of themselves. This was done by challenging them into trying new things because whānau recognized the potential that they have to develop the necessary life skills and attributes. Whānau spoke of working with the strengths of tamariki. They encouraged strengths-based practices, such as affirming the academic strengths and interests of tamariki, as a means of scaffolding their learning and helping them see the links between what is learned at school and who they want to be in the future. One response supported this saying, teach them at home. Give them every opportunity they need to learn from, praise them, forgive things they do, encourage them to do better. I'll now pass it on to Jean, who will speak on the value of respect.
Thanks, Renee. So respect is one of the key waypoints identified by whānau members as central to the ethnic and cultural backgrounds of their tamariki. Whānau in this study articulated that giving respect includes prioritising humility, engaging in respectful reciprocal relationships, and upholding their cultural practices. So for whānau, humility is an act of respect and key to success. But they also acknowledge that there can be tensions with this idea of humility due to wanting to celebrate educational success, but also expecting tamariki to remain humble. Additionally, they talked about tensions also in educational settings, where humility as a sign of respect could sometimes be misunderstood by certain educators. For example, the bowing of heads when being spoken to, or not directly looking elders in the eyes. So this was kind of the space that Whānau Pasifika were navigating with their tamariki. For Whānau Pasifika, however, humility was central to culturally and socially just education. As well as humility being a sign of respect, so was having respectful relationships built on reciprocity. This reciprocity was expressed in the exchange of knowledge and power between tamariki and adults. Reciprocity acknowledges that all parties have something to contribute and exchanges are mutually beneficial for those involved. For Whānau Pasifika, education that balances academic achievement and sustains cultural knowledges is an example of the respectful and type of reciprocal relationships that were central to them. So throughout our analysis, we found that the value of respect was expressed by Whānau Pasifika for their tamariki through their offers of practical support. For whānau, this was one of the most important characteristics or ways of demonstrating respect for their tamariki, that they were able to offer practical help that would enable tamariki to be successful and to thrive at school. So support by Whānau Pasifika for tamariki takes a collective approach, where it's not the responsibility of just one member of the whānau to provide support, but for all members across multiple generations. This support includes assisting with schoolwork and learning alongside them, while also providing opportunities for tamariki to teach whānau about what they're learning at school. In addition, Whānau Pasifika also shared that engaging with tamariki through discussions was part of this practical support, asking tamariki how their day was, having a home routine, whānau teaching tamariki about time management. All of this was part of enabling educational success. So the whānau in the study were very clear about not only encouraging the success of their tamariki through being supportive verbally, but went further in unpacking the practical means. So again, this included working alongside them, showing an interest, in their learning and communicating openly with them. Homeschool partnerships have been identified by a range of scholars as being central to student success at school. However, focus is often on the relationship between the school and the parents. The discussion from whānau in this study highlights how tamariki are contributing to this partnership between school and home by working alongside their whānau to smooth a transition. So our next value is enactment of culture, which Rahera is going to speak about.
Thank you, Jean. Whānau Pasifika members identified the enacting culture as a central value. They defined enacting culture as speaking one's reo moana, or speaking one's heritage language, participating in celebrations of culture, including eating cultural kai, wearing Pasifika clothing, and also participating in cultural performances. According to whānau members in this study, being able to speak one's reo moana is a characteristic of enacting culture. Two whānau members explain that acquiring the language means they're proud of the identity as a true Niuean, and she understands the language is able to speak it. Whilst membership of a culture is not predicated on being able to speak the language, knowledge of Pasifika languages in Aotearoa is highly revered. According to the Ministry for Pacific Peoples, there are a distressingly low number of under 15-year-olds acquiring their reo moana due to barriers such as the perception of English as a language of success, low perceived value of Pacific languages, difficulties connecting younger generations with community elders, lower rates of intergenerational transmission, lack of shared and communal spaces to learn languages. Therefore, speaking one's language is a key determinant of pride and culture, particularly because language and culture are intertwined. In the study, eating and preparing kai was a key feature of enacting culture. Akbar et al. Identified that the preparation and sharing of cultural foods enables people to form social connections. Therefore, Whānau Pasifika, living in the diaspora, see kai as a way to connect to others, both from their own culture and from other cultures. On a side note, if you have never tried Pacific foods as a Cook Islander, I suggest ikamata. Whānau Pasifika saw participation in cultural performances as a key facet of enacting their culture. Engaging in cultural performances was not only pride-inducing, but also a powerful site of learning. Faitala et al. Articulate that whānau pride in cultural performances often comes from the crucial role that groups play in the transmission of cultural knowledge and practices. Pasifika performance, like cultural events, are key to cultural expressions and embodied knowledge. Because Aotearoa is becoming more ethnically diverse with a number of tamariki belonging to more than one ethnic group, cultural identities and cultural practices are becoming more complex and nuanced. In addition, cultural groups are central to supporting whānau aspirations and can be the site for development of diasporic identities. Next up, Jean will speak about the characteristic of having a curriculum focus.
Thanks, Rahira. While whānau identified cultural practices and the enactment of their culture as a means of steering their children's cultural identity, they also articulated the importance of focusing on the curriculum within the home context. So focusing on curriculum at home to complement what was being learnt at school was understood as a core element to contributing to the success of their tamariki. Whānau members specified the importance of supporting their tamariki by helping them achieve the highest possible educational standards at school, while also providing an environment at home that was conducive to learning. For example, Whānau focused on goals such as reading daily, learning spelling words, and revising and practicing mathematical knowledge. Therefore, successful whānau is not only focused on thriving through ethnic and cultural identities, but also through educational experiences and academic identities. We found that this moves discussion from an either-or framing to a working together type of framing, where cultural and ethnic identities and educational schooling identities can work together to support success both at home and in the school setting. Next, Rahira will bring the values of Whānau Pasifika together with the characteristics of these values and how this relates to wayfinding.
Thanks, Jean. In the beginning of our presentation, we explained the significance of wayfinding, how Pasifika values were the star path by which the navigators, in this case Whānau Pasifika, find their way. We have aligned each with a characteristic or action that whānau thought would help tamariki be successful at school. The characteristics can be seen as steering of the waka. Spiller et al. Explained that for wayfinders, it is not just a matter of either following the star path or steering the waka. They must be able to do both simultaneously. Each characteristic is enacted and underpinned by key Pasifika values, which extend the characteristics from ordinary traits, descriptive words, to Pasifika value-laden behaviours and ways of living, being, knowing, and doing. There's a wayfinder in all of us. By whānau being involved, it is more likely that primary school tamariki Pasifika will see some representation of themselves at school and feel a sense of belonging, but they will also understand the importance of education to their whānau. Schools have a significant responsibility to ensure that whānau feel welcomed into their school environment. Keeping the waka steady, there is a common understanding between whānau of tamariki Pasifika, educators and policymakers that cultural values nurtured and developed in the whānau are a strength and can support our konga Pasifika towards achieving success at school. Nurturing wairua. The act of support for their tamariki could be understood as the way whānau were embodying respect. Adapting to change. At first glance, participating in cultural practices and being curriculum focused seem unrelated, but the lens of wayfinding brings a new understanding to how being curriculum focused is enacting a cultural practice. I will now pass back to Renee.
Thanks, Rahira. To wrap up our presentation, we would like to leave you with these concluding thoughts from our report, touching on the concept of wayfinding for both Akonga and Whānau, and how to navigate schooling here in Aotearoa. Again, manako wakalevu for this opportunity to share with you all the voices of Whānau Pasifika, and we hope you enjoyed it. Naka.
Kia ora for that. Thank you very much. That was really interesting. I think it's, I'm really loving this term reo moana, which I've been hearing more and more, which I think is amazing. And thinking about you talking about the idea of English being the language of success, I think resonates as well with Te Reo Māori. And so sort of thinking about how we can nurture that language in the under 15s. In a similar way. I know we've got some units in mostly primary schools, but I mean that's one way of starting to nurture some of those languages. Thinking about humility being often misunderstood by teachers, I think that's something that I can think back to my teaching days and sort of think about the different ways that that Akonga from different cultures and ethnicities respond to that one-on-one teacher interaction is something that we as teachers need to be thinking about. And also I think the whānau being welcomed into the school and how schools do that is really important. And some schools do a really great job and others perhaps need a little bit more guidance. So we have one question here from Maiava. Wonderful presentation and engaging the processes to learn of these values and foci. How do you believe some of these tola anchors strengthen the transitioning between junior schools to senior schools?
Rahira, Jean, would you guys like to speak to this question?
As a trained secondary school teacher, I really see that these values can be held through from, even though they were mainly speaking about primary Akonga, we can see that they can be held and used in that transition phase to secondary school. Often our tamariki Pasifika can get a little bit lost and left behind at secondary school when our cultural values are not present in the school. So I think that school teachers and leaders can really draw on some of the amazing work by many Pacific scholars to embed those practices in secondary school. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. I also think that sometimes there is a maybe assumption or misconception, I think, that, you know, as our young people transition from primary through intermediate into senior or secondary schools, that, you know, they need less and less support as such a little bit, you know, it's like that kind of cutting of the apron strings a little bit, speaking from experience with older teenagers. But I think actually this shows, you know, for whānau that actually they still need us just as much, and that it's not as they go on, we step back more, we can still support them and encourage, you know, these values and continue to, you know, engage in these discussions and things like that, which I think probably actually become more important potentially as people transition into those teenage years and our young people get a bit older. So I think that engaging these values and thinking about how whānau and acting them actually can really help strengthen that transition and carry on to help our young people thrive and grow in that success in our education systems. Sorry, I think I went off on a bit of a tangent, but yeah.